welcome to the Abundant Yoga Teacher podcast. My name's Amy McDonald. I'm a yoga teacher, yoga student, and a yoga business coach. And I'm here to support you to share your yoga with the people in your community who really need it. So if you're an amazing yoga teacher, but you sometimes struggle with the business part of what it is that you do, you're in the right place. I hope you thoroughly enjoy everything I've got in store for you. And if you have any suggestions, questions, or ideas for future podcasts, reach out to me on Instagram at Amy Yoga Biz Coach. Hey everybody, welcome to the Abundant Yoga Teacher podcast for the week. I hope you're all doing really well. Really well. So today, I think, right? Is it today? Is International Yoga Day? Is that right? She's Googling now. I know I've seen some of you have been posting fundraisers, and I got an email from my teacher with International Yoga Day stuff. And I think it's important here, and I won't go into detail for this episode, but if you're not aware of the history of International Yoga Day, I do think it's important to have a bit of a sense of context for some of these things, because it does have a political slant to it that you may or may not be interested in. Is it a good idea to celebrate yoga? Jay, do we want to support Hindu nationalism and Modi? You get to decide. Are they interlinked? Yes. Did you know that? Well, now you do. So anyway, all of this to say that it is apparently International Yoga Day today. And yeah, if you don't know how that happens or why, maybe do a bit of a Google and then decide. This is a special event that you want to stay connected to or not. Okay, that's my 10 cents worth on that. And for all of you Patreon supporters of mine on Patreon, thank you. I'm so touched that there's now 3 of you. Very exciting. I think we need to do a bit more of a deep dive into that International Yoga Day and the world's most famous yoga teacher, who Baba Ramdev, who I've had some interactions with, and I have some recordings that I've never made public. So I think we might talk about him, Modi, and some other intersections that might not be as commonly known as I suspect they should be in yoga studios around the world. So be on the lookout for that. If you're an existing Patreon supporter, be on the lookout for this month's bonus episode. We'll get into some juicy stuff with some footage that, when was it? It would have been 2019, I think, that I was spent a little bit of time with Baba Ramdev. And never actually shared that before. Interesting. If you haven't read his, got a great book. I can't remember what the actual title is, but DM me on Instagram if you want to check it out. I bought it in an airport, I think in Mumbai. So anyway, I bought it in in Indian airport a while back because I didn't know much about Ramdev, and then my taxi driver told me about him, and so I bought the biography. And let's just say the biography tended, let's call it even-handed, which was not... as I understand it, that biography has now been pulled from the shelves and is no longer available for sale. But if you want to try find one secondhand, good read. And just one more spicy little thing that, like I said, I'll talk about more in the Patreon bonus. But when I went to see him, it was a 2-day thing. He came to Melbourne, and there was protesters outside the venue the whole time, the full 2 full days, chanting Ramdev, go home for 2 straight days. You could hear it the whole time. So there you have it. Happy International Yoga Day. All right, so let's actually get into the topic of the day, which I have was a suggestion from Justine. Thanks, Justine. And I've tweaked it a little bit, but Justine messaged me on Insta, as I love it when you do, and send me the topics. And she, actually, I'm just going to read you the message because because I have adjusted it somewhat So many messages, so many great people to talk to. And I apologise about the squeaky chair. I not want that. It's just, it's what we've got. Ah, Jazzy, I can't find your message now. God, could I be more disorganised this week? What is going on? This is what happens when you just don't sleep enough. Anyway, I'm going to summarise because I can't find it. So Justine wanted to know, how do you handle it when studios invite you to come teach there? What's the best way to manage those types of relationships, and how can you do it in a way that feels good, works well for both parties? And how do you manage the specifics like the promotion, connecting with their people, managing travel expenses, etc.? How do you make these sorts of things fair for both parties? So before I get into the details of my response to all of that, I want to say congratulations to Justine. Follow her, everybody, Justine Thompson Yoga, because if that's happening, that's awesome. Well done. Okay, so I've decided that the topic is going to be this: clear, prosperous, and easeful guest workshops. Like what I did there, that's actually from notes. I actually pre-prepared. God, get a podcast. So I kind of in my mind, this looks almost like a decision tree, right? And things break down depending on, like a choose your own adventure. Remember those books? Remember those things called books? And so the first sort of fork in the road is, if you're going to be traveling and teaching your signature workshop elsewhere, the first thing to decide is this actually a collaboration, or is this me traveling and teaching my workshop on my own? And, there are real pros and cons to both. I know, for example, a bunch of you have been there with me at these where I do my one-day events around the place. And there are times, like I co-taught, for example, one in the first one that I taught in Dublin. I co-taught that with Dougal Meacham, and we just rented a space that was happy with his amount of insurance. And neither of us had been there before, and we rocked up on the day, and turns out it was lovely. And same deal, in Perth, I rented a gorgeous space in Perth, and that lady had a serious bond on her premises, which I thought was awesome. Way to protect your shiz, lady. So you can do it that way, where you just rent the space yourself and turn up and have at it, or you can do it more like a collab. So, for example, I did that in Singapore with Sarah Bargigian. We co-taught a one-day event, and she, in the space where she taught her classes then, and she invited, a whole bunch of people that she knew. I've done the same thing in Glasgow with Laura up there. So this is a sort of first decision to make. Is my traveling signature workshop something that I want to do in collaboration with the studio and partner with them, or am I just looking to rent some space and go out and do it on my own? Obviously, going out and doing it on your own is far simpler in terms of relationship management, because it's just you and you, baby. I'm making presumptions about your inner self-talk, but conceivably you're on the same page with yourself with what needs to go on. And so if you're insured and you're happy with the rental rate, then you can be wholly responsible for your own success. And as many of you know about me, those of you who have been through GYYB know about me, I like certainty in my life. I like to know when things are happening, and I like to know where, and I like to know in goddamn advance. And so knowing that I can find a space, rent it, run my shiz, and being in control of all of it feels good. So when I've taught, DM me if you were there. I taught that same event in London, and it was a last-minute thing. I was supposed to go to Berlin. That fell through, so instead I thought, well, fuck it, let's do this thing in London instead. And so I rented what was it? It was like the London Mathematical Society conference room. Random. But, and you all came at the last minute and we had fun and it was great. I like doing those. But what you don't get out of those, of course, is access to the venue's community. At least, there are ways that you can sort of MacGyver that, but not in an endorsed way where the studio is actually adding sort of imprimatur to your brand and encouraging their people to come along. So like I said, in Singapore, a lot of the people that came to that particular event knew Sarah. They'd either trained with her or they were her students, and so they came along because of her recommendation. Or same in Glasgow, a lot of those yoga teachers were connected and they knew the studio owners, and so I wouldn't have been able to, at least not that easily, connect and invite them along. So there is a great benefit in the collaboration approach. As well, and what I'm reading in reading Justine's message, obviously the collaboration model can be instigated by the venue as well as by you right? So it's an opportunity to spread your wings and go do something else, which I think it's good for our professional development to be seeking out those sorts of opportunities anyway. I know that's why I teach at the little yoga festivals that happen around here. I lose money on those by the time I get myself there and stay and do all the rest of it. Don't make any money. It's a loss, but it's good for me professionally to be meeting new people and teaching new folks and bigger groups and using a microphone and all that good stuff that doesn't happen very often otherwise. So we're going to pursue here, if coming back to the idea of the choose your own adventure, we're going to pursue now the collaboration model. And like I said, the next 2 points are you reaching out to someone or is someone reaching out to you? And it seems given that Justine is the creatrix of today's topic, let's go down her route of the decision tree. So the next step is, they reached out to her to invite her along. And so she's now, I'm presuming, finding herself at a point where she's looking to come up with a proposal. And the negotiation is now commencing about what that proposal should include and how things will break down. So this might drive many of you crazy, but in preparing for the topic, what arose for me is sort of realizing that there is no hard and fast answer here. There is no definitely break it down this way, definitely get this much percent, definitely take on these tasks, but not those, because every relationship is going to be different. And you are always going to be different in terms of your business goals, your current strategy, what you're working on. So while it can be handy to have like a go-to list of rates so you're not throwing yourself into kind of like, chitta-vritti overload every time someone proposes something to you, at the same time, your needs and requirements will alter and change over time depending on what it is that you're working on. So if we go back to, so all of this to say that what you want in the partnership agreement will be different each time. And that's okay. And knowing what your priorities are and negotiating for them is the most important piece. And your priorities are your priorities. So they might not be important to someone else. They might be, someone else might be judgy of them or seek to make you wrong because of them. And that's okay. They get to feel that and you get to still have them as your priorities. So example, if I'm flying over 3 hours, I'm not going economy. I do not sit in a tiny chair with a fold down table for more than 3 hours. And so this is something that gets negotiated. If someone wants to invite me to do a thing, then my business class flight is a non-negotiable. I'll do Ryanair for 3 hours, absolute max. In fact, it's been a while, so I don't know, maybe the tolerance has gone down. And these days, it's also embarrassing, overshare. I can't read on an economy seat because I can't get the book far enough away from my face to see the print anymore. I know there's a cheaper solution than flying business class called like classes, but anyway. So I remember interviewing. I won't disclose who it was. In fact, I think she said it out loud in the interview. But what I didn't express at the time was the shock of her. Anyway, famous yoga teacher, does the Christian yoga thing. It's her jam. Loves a bit of Jesus on the yoga mat. Fantastic, brilliant. And anyway, super, super lovely person and high vibe and traveling around the world and really going for it. And she was doing a lot of yoga teacher trainings. This would be a few years ago now. A lot of yoga teacher trainings in China. Big emerging market, rise of the middle class, ni hao, and all wanting to become a yoga lao shi. Great. And so she was going over there a number of times a year and teaching a 200-hour yoga teacher training. They had a translator and all that. And we were talking about, so I asked her, I was curious, how do you stay well on the road? Because that's a time zone shift and China's a different place if you're, living in wherever she lives, somewhere in the Midwest. It's a different jam. And how do you cope with that? And she went on to list out all of this stuff about the wacky shit that she does so that she can feel comfortable in her economy chair. And I'm thinking, that's a long haul flight. What is that like? Wherever you're flying out of, my favorite, Dulles, not, to Beijing or wherever she's going, Guangzhou, bloody hell. That's no joke. That's a long time in a shitty chair. Now, she said to me, she said, I'm quite small. So I'm thinking, I don't care. Like if I need a flat bed. I don't even just need business class. I need to know that this chair goes 180 degrees. And if that icon on the button that puts the chair up and down, if it shows flat but only goes to 160, I get pissed off. Back in the day when my fabulous sister was working for me as my community manager, she did all my travel bookings. And she knew, you need to call the airline and make sure when you say flatbed, do you actually mean flat like the horizon flat? So, all of this to say that, am I being hyperbolic? Actually, probably not. No, ask my sister. She would say, actually, I'm worse than what I've just conveyed to you. But the reason I'm playing this up is because I really want to reiterate the point that matters so much to me. Didn't matter to Tammy one hoot. She had a neck pillow that inflated. She was happy. Me, on the other hand, it's a flatbed or I'm just a cantankerous biatch the entire flight. And yes, I can keep it up the entire flight. Thank you very much. 36 hours to get to Europe. Yes. So it doesn't matter what someone else thinks about your priorities. If they're your priorities, they have to stay on the list. When you start negotiating, don't shrink or pretend to be someone else because you just want to land the deal. Now, the flip side of this, of course, is sometimes it's okay to negotiate in a way that could be conceived to be in your disinterest. So, for example, as I was saying, Jodie and I taught a couple of months ago, we taught at the Inverloch Yoga Festival. And I asked, could I teach at Inverloch as well? And the organizer, Rosie, said, sure. And she doesn't pay me. She lets me bring a friend if I want to. Sob, no one came with me. Anyway, that's a whole other story. So I had to get myself there. It was 3 hours in the car. I stayed a couple of nights at an Airbnb, food, all the rest of it. So lost money. Didn't even get the, want to join my mailing list? Here it is. Sign up. None of it. So you could say that I didn't negotiate in my own interests there. But actually, this is what I'm talking about. They're my priorities. I wanted to go do that. I wanted to meet new people. I wanted to take a whole bunch of photos to post on my social media. I wanted to have another anecdote tell you all in this podcast and then hopefully generate some material for the best way to go teach feel good, teaching your first festival, etc. So I had other interests there. And so my priority in that situation wasn't to make any money. I was happy. It cost me about $1,000 to do that, and it was totally worth it for me. So again, when it comes to negotiating an arrangement with a new business partner, you need to be very clear on what your priorities are and not worry about what other people might think of them, either that they're too outlandish or that you're somehow self-abandoning or self-sabotaging. As long as you've done the inner work to get clear on what they are, then they are the right ones. And if your Svadhyaya practice is in place and you know yourself enough, then you're not at great risk of doing, of that sort of self-abandonment. You're making a conscious choice. I'm okay to lose $1,000 on this one because it's important for me and these other reasons. Or I'm okay to, I'm not okay to drive 3 hours and then teach that same day. I need to be put up the night before, and I'm not staying at the caravan park, or whatever that looks like for you. One of my clients had been asked to come and teach some classes at a retreat, and it had been on the books for a while, COVID, etc. She was rekindling this partnership, and the retreat leader said, "Well, I'll pay you such and such to teach the classes," and that was a great rate, and I'll pay you per kilometre to get here, and it was, I don't know, an hour or so in the car. Great. But then you have to pay for your own accommodation at the retreat centre, and you have to buy your own meals, which meant that my client would turn out totally at break even, if not a little in the red. And for her, that didn't make sense. She wasn't getting in front of a whole new lot of people. Maybe there was 8 people that she would meet. Was that worth spending money and her whole weekend for someone who really is looking to manage her life in a way where her business supports her and not the other way around? No. So she didn't take up that opportunity, and not because she's, I don't know, we can get so judgy about this stuff. Oh, she thinks she's so special, or she thinks she deserves extra treatment, or why on earth would I, any of that. Just deciding this isn't for me. This isn't a deal that if you're not cool with my terms, then this is a no for me. And that's absolutely okay. You don't have to compromise like this. You just get to say no. Okay, so let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty. You're clear on what your priorities are. Do you need to make money on this or not? Is this about exposure for you or not? Is this about fostering a relationship with a venue that might bloom into something else? Is this simply about testing yourself? Shit, can I really do this? What does it even feel like to drive 3 hours, teach somewhere to a bunch of people I don't know and drive home? And you're prepared to just give it a go and see. So once you're clear on what you want, that's what you put into your proposal. Now, I want to talk about some specifics, and these are I've chosen these pieces based a bit on Justine's message to me, but also based on my experience having done a lot of these, and of course having had so many of you as clients over the years and supported you with these sorts of things too. Now, the disclaimer or the preamble here is, like I said earlier, I feel personally it's my basic human need to feel certain about things. This is some teachings from Tony Robbins that we play with in GYYB. I'm a certainty person. I like knowing what's going on, and that makes me feel safe. And I know that about myself. So for me, I like to assume as much of the responsibility for something's success as I possibly can. Now, this is kind of like getting tantric in a way, because I don't believe that means if I'm taking on 100% of the responsibility for something being success, that the other person is taking on 0. I think we should both take on 100%. In fact, that's not just Tantra. That's Dr. Phil. It's not 50-50. I can't do the accent. It's 100%, 100%. That's what I'm talking about. So what do you actually mean, Amy? Can you ground this in an example? Sure. So what that looks like is I am going to co-teach something. Let's say Wendy Hansford Yoga, and I taught some workshops last month, crushed them, and there's more coming up if you want to come. Anyway, and we were going to just do it once, but we filled that in a couple of days, so we put on another one, and we filled that in a couple of days, so we put on another one, and we filled that, and then we ran out of time. We probably just could still be doing them. Anyway, we were both committed to filling those things. And so we both went for it like our hair was on fire. And I felt I built the page, did the Facebook events, I was up for emailed my list a bunch of times, posted in Facebook, did all the things that I tell you all to do. And so did Wendy. So there was none of this, well, I'll do this and you do that. We both just went freaking nuts on it because we were both obsessed with having these things full. And we filled them and it was great. And for me, just having this sense of a collective shared energy of we both went for it. And we took a look at everything just out of curiosity. Where did people come from? How many were, inverted commas, her students, and how many were, again, mine? And how many were, love this one, randoms. And most, 60, 70% of the people who came along were Wendy's students. So that was awesome. But there was none of this kind of I feel bad. I should only take this much of the money because only these many people were mine. Or you didn't do enough because all of the people who came were my people and you didn't bring enough people in. There was none of that icky, weird, yucky stuff because right at the beginning, we just both decided, let's freaking crush this. Let's do all the things we can. Let's split the money 50-50, no drama. And so it worked out really well, really easily. Perfect. So coming back to this idea of taking sort of as much responsibility, radical personal responsibility is how I refer to it. What that looks like is first, not being grateful for everything that your partner does, but not relying on it because you can't control someone else's behavior. Wow, I'm really going Dr. Phil today, right? You can just do you. You can hope for the best from the other person, but you ain't in control there. But what you can do is support them as much as possible. So what I recommend is you make the poster, you send them your media pack, you send them your headshots, you propose that you'll do an Insta takeover, you tell them you want to be interviewed on their Facebook and set up the time. You post in local Facebook groups. You ask them if they want you to set up the Facebook ad. You take on as much as you possibly can. You give them the template and all of the copy and the times and the descriptions, and you just make it as easy as possible for your partner to promote you. So do as much of it as you can. Now, if they don't use it, or they have their own templates, or they don't want to do the things that you're proposing, fine. That's on them. But at least you've done as much as you can to make it as effective and successful and easy as you can for the other party. And this is, classic Bhagavad Gita, right? You freaking want to go for it, and ultimately it's up to it's Ishvara Pranidhana, right? I don't know. What do you think, guy upstairs, or universal consciousness, or whatever you want to call it? But right, so at no point does Krishna say to Arjuna, "Oh, fuck it, don't worry about it." He's like, "Dude, get up, get your shit together. This is your fight. You are going to do it. This is what you've come here for. It's what you're meant for. You can't control if you're going to win or not, but god damn it, you're going to fight like hell." And not sans the violent aspect, but that's how I propose working with a joint venture when it comes to promotions. Go for it like bananas, and then if you end up with a project partner who's a bit then that's okay. You ain't in control of that. You just front load as much as you can so that you're much more likely to get the result that you want. So definitely that. Be specific about stuff, especially quantities of things. So, if you're going to charge mileage, is it going to be 50 cents a kilometre over 20 Ks, or is it going to be hours in the car is how you charge it? If you're doing incidentals or food allowance or something like that, get it specific. You don't want to have anything that can be questioned after the fact. And be clear, you're going to put this proposal to somebody, they can always come back with a counter offer. But stuff that's anything that's unclear can cause conflict down the road. And look, in my experience, the yoga industry is not wanting for flaky business people. The yoga industry is not wanting for spiritual folks who might not yet have done quite enough work to realize that they're an asshole. So the more specific you can be with all of this stuff, the less likely you are to just cause friction down the road. And Jay, we all love that. Okay, so in terms of just in us specifically, well, how do we know what's fair for both parties? We don't. We can't presume what's fair for someone else. How do we even know? Oh, God, I have a dating analogy for you there, but do you want it? Do you want me to tell it to you? Fair. What's fair to ask for in a first date? Different strokes for different folks. I haven't done a dating analogy for a while. I got asked once, matched with this person on an app. Go to Melbourne, have some dinner, drinks, whatever. And this person asked me, hey, before you come down to Melbourne, could you go and get a Brazilian wax, like a Brazilian wax? That person thought, totally realistic. It's totally fair to ask for that. Why not? Me, on the other hand, look, fuck it. We're into the weeds already. You can call this an overshare, but you know. I know some of you listen to this podcast nude, in the shower. Yes, you know who you are. So, hey, what not to share? I've never had a Brazilian in my life, and I'm not starting anytime soon. Seriously. God, it makes me laugh. And you know what? I loved it so much that person sent me that message because it saved me a whole trip to Melbourne. No judgment. Okay, you like to know that when you go on a first date with somebody, they're all like Lolita downstairs. Good for you. Okay. All that tells me is we're not a match. And the same is true for you with your contracts. You know, like we can't presume to know what's fair to another party. I've heard crazy stories of yoga teachers getting paid like $5 a class, not per student, like the end, ceiling. I don't think that's fair, but obviously some people do because they offer it and they say yes to it. So we can't presume to know what's fair for the other person. What we can do is feel good about what we're proposing because it feels good to us, and then invite them to counteroffer if they would like to propose something different. Okay, so let's see. Let me go back. So what else? What have I missed, Justine? Are there pitfalls to avoid? Yes, the pitfalls to avoid are presuming this, and in fact, this is one that has bitten me on the ass hard. And I'm talking losing thousands of dollars hard. The pitfalls are presuming that the person that you're working with is as business savvy as you are. Now, I know so many of you probably have an inner critic that's telling you that you're shit at business. But I got to tell you, I have worked with so many yoga teachers at this stage that if you are listening to this podcast, you are already better at business than many yoga teachers. And remember, call back to that thing I said about spiritual people still being assholes. They're everywhere. So what can sometimes happen, and it has happened to me, is you think that you're just middle of the road in business. So of course everybody's at least as good at this stuff as you are, right? Because what do you know? Until you get there, and in fact, the studio owner is also working a corporate job because the studio is hemorrhaging money, and so she's making a salary just to keep the doors open. Or I could go on with these types of horror stories. So don't presume that your partner knows what they're doing. This loops us back to that radical personal responsibility. The more you can set them up to be successful, the better for everybody. So that is the biggest pitfall. What other pitfalls have I? I mean, really, the only other pitfalls that I could speak to, I guess, are like going to a venue sight unseen. You know, if you've never been there before, the the first retreat I ever taught in Bali, we booked that hotel from like not even a decent Agoda or something, like a fairly average looking hotel booking thing, and you put Bali plus shitty hotel booking site together, and that's an interesting mix. So I was co-teaching this with a friend of mine, and so we booked this joint sight unseen. And we thought maybe we should rock up like a day or two early just to check it out. We weren't staying there, but we just thought we'd, rent a taxi and go out and check it out, maybe have lunch out there. And this place was, Jesus, I don't know let's just call it a rock solid 2.5 stars. So we spent the next 48 hours it would have made an amazing reality TV show, like Retreat Rescue with Sarah and Amy. We could painting and towels, and we had every meal for the whole week-long retreat externally catered. That restaurant, air quotes restaurant, unless all you wanted was like some mediocre nasi goreng for a week, you were in trouble. Yeah. So, there's that. I also remember I taught a series of workshops over a weekend once in Alice Springs I think it's actually just the Shivananda yoga space. And, we get there and it's like, no candles, no this, no that, fold the blankets like this, do this. Da, da, da. So I guess that's a pitfall. Get a sense of the venue and its strengths and limitations before you get there is a good idea, and just understanding. So things like I remember fabulous Stacey, and I co-taught a workshop in Brisbane, and at a really nice yoga space that's managed by some friends of hers. But the booking that we had was bumper to bumper, and they didn't have a waiting area, so we had to all wait outside right up until go time when the class left and we could go in. So there was no time for me to kind of, I don't know, do any prep or kind of review my notes or anything like that, which for that particular workshop at this point in my career wasn't a big deal because it wasn't the first time I'd taught it. But if it was the first time I'd taught something, I would have wanted at least a good 15 minutes in there to kind of get myself together and take some pranayama and get prepared. So that's a pitfall when you're going to a place where you've never been before. Things like, what does the venue actually look like? What are the requirements of the venue? Does it have the equipment that you need? Does it have things like, I don't know, if you had planned to do some kind of puja but they don't let you have candles, like, are you fucked? So figuring out those sorts of details, and then also just on things like access. I remember we did Renee and Matt and Jody and I did a photo shoot in, I don't know, Yarraville or something, and when we got there, it was difficult to get into the venue. Very fancy electronic kind of app-based access situation, and that slowed us down a little bit. So that would be a pitfall. Just really knowing how the venue works, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how you get in and let yourself out, and are you also, when you buy that time or when they schedule you in, if you know you need some prep time beforehand, making sure that that's going to be possible for you. And then just the last thing that I'm going to finish up pretty much, I think, with Justine's topic. And again, thanks, Jess, for sending this through. It's great. She says here, I'm trying to be clear from the start about terms, but they all vary, and one place I'll be traveling a few hours to get to. So how does that work? No, there is nothing that says you need to be consistent with these negotiations. You can have different proposals for all of your different joint venture partners. Remember at the start of the episode, I was saying it's nice to have some kind of touchstones so that you don't feel like you're starting from scratch every time, particularly if this stuff tends to throw you for a loop. But each situation is different. And so it would make sense that just because one yoga studio got this deal and another one got that deal, there's nothing that says that there's anything lacking or wanting in terms of business ethics or conduct in that scenario. In fact, that's just fit for a purpose. You're customizing each proposal to each potential joint venture partner. And I would argue that's perfect. So get consistent to the degree that it makes things easier for you, but not to so far rigid that you're feeling that you can't actually, there's no space to customize based on, different variables in the equation. It's kind of like a hyperextension, right? Like you don't want to max the joint way out so that you can't feel any energy flow in there, but you don't want to be super flippy floppy either so that there's no strength and rigor. So you find that middle ground. Okay, so there you have it. Pretty much, I guess, to summarize today, when you start to get invited to teach your signature workshops elsewhere, spend some time, first of all, getting clear on what your priorities are. What are your non-negotiables? What do you need to make it worthwhile? And sometimes it might be, and most of the time maybe even, it might be that it's financially rewarding for you, but that is not the only indicator of success, and that's okay. If something you do in your business loses money, that's only a bad thing if it happened and you didn't want it to. And even then, there's always got great lessons and you can try it better next time. But, maybe you want exposure. Maybe you want connection. So just get clear on what your priorities are and articulate them in the clearest way you possibly can on paper, folks. This is not just a chat. Write that shit down. And better yet, put it in a contract, get them to sign it. Are you going to take someone to court? No. But I'm not kidding. There is and I could drop names, famous people have flaked out on me. There is some flaky shit in the yoga industry. It's all love, it's all good, it's all oneness, including my lack of organization, man. Annoying. So to the degree that you can. Did I mention that I'm a certainty person? Can't wait to see you, GYYBers. Then, even once those terms are clear and they've committed to, I'll do this many posts and this many lives and I'll spend this much on ads or whatever with the marketing, I'll send out this many emails, still over-deliver. Still do yours and then some of theirs. Still give them as much as you possibly can to make it really easy. Remember, Krishna in the chariot, without being attached to the fruits. You can't control what they do, but you can set them up to be as successful as possible for you. And then just a couple of pitfalls. Don't rely on someone to be as good at business as you are. Chances are they won't be. And I advise against full-on sight unseen venue right up to the wire. Sometimes for a half-day workshop, who cares if it smells like dim sims? That's okay. But definitely don't do it for a 1-week retreat. All right, everybody. Thank you for being a listener to this podcast. I am just exceedingly grateful to have your ears for a little bit of time every week. Thanks to Justine for the topic for this week. If there is a topic that you want me to cover, do send it through at Amy Yoga Biz Coach. I'd love to hear from you. Next week's podcast will be recorded from our Patreon studio. So everybody, all of my patrons, patrons, can join me live for the recording of that. Get your questions, collaborate, chat with me. It's going to be fun. So that will be next week's episode. And if you are interested in supporting this podcast, if you value it in your life, you can find me on Patreon, patreon.com/Amy McDonald, or you can use the link in the episode notes. There's all sorts of goodies that come with being a Patreon, bonus episode every month, depending on the level that you sign up to, some one-to-one coaching, showing up for these recordings on Zoom and saying, hey. So there's some good stuff in there if you want to go check that out. But until next week, take care, everybody. Bye. So there you have it, folks, another edition of the Abundant Yoga Teacher podcast. Hey, favour to ask. If you found the content useful, I would be very grateful if you could support this podcast by giving me a 5-star rating. And if you've got a moment, a review would be super cool. No pressure, of course. Like I said earlier, if you have any suggestions for podcast topics in the future, I would love to be in service. DM me on Instagram at Amy Yoga Biz Coach. Take deep care.